Now, before we get into looking how to actually set up a garden, especially a large scale kind of garden, I wanted to just share with you a quick tip. If you have a polytunnel and you have some beds free, especially this time of the year, a good thing to do is to sew them all up and use them as holding beds. That's what I've done here. So I have like Russian kale in the back, I have quinoa, I have endive, I have turnip, and all these don't really mind being transplanted and then later on hardened up and moved outside to be planted outside.
So anyway, this is Youngblood Piper Frank, going out to David, works with nature. Hope you can answer my questions, friend, and take care.
Of course, I'm more than happy to help with any of the questions you or anybody might have. First of all, I would like to say, of course, an extra thank you for, you know, making an actual video, going through the extra little bit of effort in doing so and allowing me to use your video in this video as well. So let's have a look at what Youngblood Piper has to say.
Now, a few questions I've got for David today. 1. Are there any benefits of a raised garden other than that it might keep certain weeds out? Or is that just more of an urban setting, an urban garden? Clearly, I probably won't be putting any sort of raised garden out here unless it's necessary.
Raised beds. Now, of course they're not really necessary, especially if it's such a large kind of area that I saw in the video. You know, it's going to cost a lot of money. It's not really worth it, especially, like, the advantage of a raised bed really is that you can, you're adding more and more layers of topsoil into it, because you'd have to get in a lot of topsoil as well, and that increases the, you know, ability for the roots to kind of expand and they get bigger. Bigger roots means bigger plants, and that's pretty much the only real advantage that I can see. Also, you can kind of plant right up to the edge, but it's only a little bit of extra space, so those are the advantages. Now, if you haven't got the money and you're doing that large an area, then what I would say is do the double dig gardening bed method, the double dig bed. I've made a video actually on it, so check it out. Yeah, and I hope that answers that question really, because in my opinion that's the way I would go. I wouldn't waste my money on, you know, all that wood and things like that. Okay, so let's take a look at what else he has to ask as well.
I want to figure out how I can best keep weeds out because, as you can see, you know, they like to creep their way in from outside. I figured you could probably put some sort of barrier up, but I don't know if there's any better solution. Also, every year, this back half of the garden dries up and just becomes so dry it cracks. And the only thing we ever manage to get planted out here is, you know, sunflowers sometimes make it out here, and we usually line the side of the garden with pumpkins or melons of some sort. Whether or not we eat them, they generally keep small little critters out for whatever reason. Viney plants seem to keep the small critters out. They don't keep the deer out though. But I want to know if there's a way. Do you think that it's drying up just because it's so close to the field that the nutrients are being pulled out? And how could I prevent that from happening this year?
Okay, so to keep the weeds out there's two things you need to do. First of all, I imagine you have weeds coming into the garden beds, the kind of creeping weeds like creeping buttercup, and you might have different types of weeds, but kind of creepers and grass that kind of grows in. The one way to combat that is to dig a kind of a trench. Say if the vegetable bed is here, you kind of have a slope, and then you'd have a very straight trench down, and then what happens is any kind of creepers, especially grass, now when it grows out, it just kind of dies in the air. The roots kind of die in the air. Any kind of underground creepers can't go through that much. I found it to be a very, very good barrier. Plus you can kind of cut the grass right up to the edge, and that's really the good thing about this kind of thing is that you have a kind of nice straight line, and you can just cut right up to the edge. Keep slug population down as well. So it's a good way to go about it. Plus you get a lot of kind of grass. I'll go more into that at the end of the video. I'll talk a little bit more about how I would set up my own kind of large-scale vegetable garden, just to give you an idea. So that's one method. The other thing you can do as well, of course, is you mentioned about that kind of part of the garden that is always cracking. What I would say that now we have a lot of rain here, so I'm not that experienced with droughty kind of conditions. But what I would think is there's several reasons for that. It could be clay soil and it dries out really fast. So add lots of compost into it should solve the problem. Um, Also, using a layer of mulch will definitely protect the soil from drying out, do a lot of good to the soil as well. But otherwise, it could be that there's a hard pan. Maybe you drove on there with a tractor. I know you live on a farm. That's pretty much my guess. Is if anybody else might know what it could be, do comment away. Let young blood piper know. That would be great.
Checking the pH of your soil. Is it necessary? I've done it before when growing specialty plants, or when we start plants indoors or something like that, or flowers, things of that sort. I'll check the pH, but I've never done it for the vegetable garden. Would you recommend that I do?
So the pH of your soil is of course going to be as important for vegetables as any kind of other kind of plants. There are kind of two categories that plants belong to, and you have the kind of course acidic and alkaline, and in between of course neutral. And the reason is that you have woodland species and you have kind of grassland species. A lot of vegetables and a lot of plants derived from weeds, either belonging into that category. So you have the acidic kind of conditions or the alkaline conditions. So like brassicas are grassland weed that have been evolved to bred into these lush kind of tasting cabbages or whatever. So if you want to, if you find after testing your soil that it's too acidic, you can always add lime. There's a kind of a nice don't use builder's lime or anything like that. There's a kind of actually crushed limestone rock that you can add, and it's less harmful. Of course, adding compost tea, masses of bacteria, they create their kind of they tweak the soil to their own kind of conditions. They're like alkaline conditions, so they emit this kind of bioslime. So eventually, it'll make your soil more alkaline. If it's too alkaline, what you can always do towards the winter, when you've taken out the crops, you can actually get a lot of pine needles, dig them in, wait maybe a good couple of months before you start planting, because they do rob a lot of the nitrogen out because they're full of carbon, but they will actually make your soil more and more acidic as well. So that's another option. So do definitely test your soil, maybe test it around the area and see what the pH is, and then maybe rectify the situation accordingly.
And rotating crops. We have never rotated crops. Maybe just a little bit, but not intentionally. It's usually the same every year. Every year it's the same. I didn't really think about rotating crops until I saw David's video. So, would you recommend starting now? I'm sure it's probably a good thing too. And if so, we've waited so long to rotate crops. Is there something we should do to kind of combat that negative, whatever's resulted from that? So anyway.
Yeah, rotating crops of course is a big must, because you will find if you're planting the same crops in the same area year after year, the plants will start getting sick, they start degrading. The worst thing you could get is, for instance, clubroot in the brassica family, but also a lot of kind of grubs start making a home in the soil. So you're asking kind of how to combat that negative influence. Like if you've done it for years and years and years, actually the best solution is practice crop rotation, because even after a few years already, most of the diseases will diminish. Plus, another good thing about crop rotation is that a lot of kind of nutrients are taken up as different groups of families, and if you grow the same kind of plant year in year out on the beds, it's going to rob those nutrients from the soil. Whereas if you kind of rotate, the soil has actually time to recover those type of nutrients, and the plants can take them up maybe within a year, or within like 10 years, depending on the crop rotation that you're using. If you're using, I would say a 8-year kind of crop rotation would be a minimum. 9 or 10 years would be even better, because you definitely have any problem then with clubroot. So yeah, that's pretty much with crop rotation. Definitely practice it. the more complicated your crop rotation is, the more different variables you can add to it. Like for instance, you could, add things like seed saving into your crop rotation. There's a thing that I'm thinking about at the moment is where you jump, do a kind of jump crop rotation where, like often when a crop is next to each other, even if you meet, say if you have brassica here, the next year you put brassica into the next bed, a lot of grubs can travel. So if you jump it, that could be avoided. Just an idea. And that's pretty much all I have to say about the old crop rotation. Definitely practice it. It's definitely worth it. Now, by judging actually at the garden that you have there, it's quite large. So I would kind of recommend. I know you work on a farm and you're taking over the garden from your parents, and you want to really give it your most. I would kind of say to you, it's okay to, once in a while, cheat. Just providing you only do it once. You couldn't get in a tractor and just maybe plow the whole thing, rotate the whole thing, and maybe start afresh, because it's going to be a huge amount of work for you. And I don't know if, I would feel maybe not up for it. I'd probably call Mehel, where you bring lots of friends and they help you, because you're going to need manpower for it, or a tractor or something like that. So maybe plow it, rotate it, mark out the beds. The beds could be in between the tractor tires. That's always a good way. Then the pathways could be lawns. You can make them quite wide, so you can go up and down with a lawnmower. It's clean, keeps the slugs away, and you use all that for mulching. The other thing as well is, if you have lawns there and you do have to go in there with the tractor again because you left something go messy and you want to rotate it quickly, you're going to damage the worm population. But the worm population will be alright, because they'll also be under the lawn, so they can come back in. So that's not a problem. I mentioned earlier that you need to take out all the stones as well. Also, such a large area, it requires tons and tons of compost. So throw in tons and tons of compost. It doesn't really matter if it's fresh. It doesn't matter if you do it in autumn. But if it's kind of like spring now, you have a lot of snow there, you want to really try and get broken down compost, because then you can grow straight away. Yeah, and that's pretty much how I would set up a vegetable kind of garden. Maybe make sure that you also, of course, around each bed, then try to dig that kind of trench all the way around it. Just makes for kind of a cleaner, kind of like less weeding, and use lots and lots of mulching, because that's going to keep the weeds down, make your soil healthy, and you're going to, in time, in about 3 or 4 years, you're going to have amazing vegetables. So, hope you enjoyed the video. Keep sending me in those video responses, and yeah, thanks for watching.